I'm 37 now. This morning I woke up before sunrise, not because I had somewhere to go, but because the house was too quiet to keep sleeping. I lay there for a while, staring at the ceiling fan, turning slowly above me. It makes a soft clicking sound every few rotations. I used to mean to fix it. I never did. Now I almost like the sound. It reminds me that something is still moving. I got up, folded my blanket carefully, and walked to the kitchen. I made tea in the same steel kettle I have used for years. The handle is slightly loose when the water begins to boil. The lid rattles gently. In the past, mornings were busier. There were lunch boxes to pack, shirts to iron, someone asking where their keys were. Now it's just me measuring tea leaves for 1 cup. I sat at the small table near the window and watched the street slowly come to life. A man walked his dog. A shopkeeper across the road lifted his shutter halfway and stretched his arms. Nothing unusual, just another ordinary morning. I used to think silence meant peace. Now it mostly feels like space that never gets filled. When I was younger, I believed money would fix everything. Not in a greedy way, at least that's what I told myself. I grew up in a house where bills were always late and conversations were tense. My father counted notes twice before handing them over. My mother reused cooking oil longer than she should have. I remember the way adults lowered their voices when money was discussed, as if even speaking about it too loudly could make it disappear. I promised myself I would never live like that. Stability became my goal. Then it slowly became my excuse. I met her when I was 26. She wasn't dramatic or loud. She had a steady way of speaking. She listened fully before responding. Our relationship didn't begin with grand gestures. It began with shared tea at a roadside stall after work, with small conversations about family, with walking together without feeling rushed. After we married, we moved into a modest apartment. The paint on the walls was slightly uneven. The balcony was narrow, but we were satisfied. In the evenings, we sat on 2 plastic chairs and watched people below. We talked about simple plans, maybe a better sofa one day, maybe travel somewhere nearby. I told her I would work hard so we could live comfortably. She smiled and said comfort was not only about money. I nodded. I thought she meant we should also have nice furniture. I didn't realize she meant something else. In the early years, I worked normal hours. I came home tired but present. We ate dinner together most nights. Sometimes we argued about small things, dishes left in the sink, whether I forgot to buy something from the market, ordinary couple arguments, nothing serious. Then opportunities started appearing. A colleague left. I was offered extra responsibility. The pay increase was modest at first, but it felt like progress. I told her it might mean longer hours for a while. She said she understood. For a while, turned into years, I began leaving earlier and returning later. At first, she waited up for me, dinner reheated, questions ready. I answered, but often while thinking about the next day's tasks. Even when I was physically there, my mind felt occupied. She would sometimes say, "You're tired all the time." I would respond, "It's just this phase." That phrase became familiar in our house. This phase will pass. Things will settle soon. I repeated it so often I believed it. We had 2 children. When our first was born, I felt a deep sense of responsibility. I looked at that small face and thought about school fees, medical expenses, future savings. Love translated in my mind as protection. Protection meant money. Our routine became predictable. I woke before everyone else. Left quietly, she handled most of the day. Doctor visits, feeding schedules, sleepless nights. I told myself my role was to ensure there was no financial strain. I missed some first steps, first clear words. I saw photos later. I smiled and said they were growing fast. She sometimes looked at me as if she wanted to say more, but she didn't push. As the children grew, I became stricter about structure, homework done on time, lights off at a certain hour. I thought discipline would shape them well. They learned to respect me, but I'm not sure they learned to open up to me. Dinner slowly changed. At first, it was noisy, with children talking over each other. Later, it became quieter. They spoke more to their mother. I would listen, but rarely join deeply. Work often stayed in my head. If I did speak, it was usually advice, practical suggestions, not curiosity. She once said at the table, "You don't really hear us." I felt defensive. I said, "I'm sitting right here." In my mind, that was proof enough. I measured my success in numbers, promotions, savings accounts, a better house in a better neighborhood. When we finally moved, I felt proud. I walked through the rooms, imagining the security it represented. She stood beside me, smiling softly. I don't know what she felt fully. On Sundays, I often chose rest over outings. Rest meant quiet time with financial planning or reading reports. She took the children to the park without me. They returned with stories. I listened halfway. We didn't fight much. I considered that a sign of maturity. No shouting, no drama. But we also avoided hard conversations. If she began to talk about feeling distant, I would say, "Why focus on negatives when we have so much?" That usually ended the discussion. I see now that silence is not always peace, sometimes it's surrender. As the children became teenagers, they stopped trying to pull me into their small worlds. They handled their problems mostly with her. I was the one they approached for permission or funds. I was dependable in that way, reliable, but distant. She suggested we take small trips, even just weekend drives. I usually declined, saying there was too much to manage. I feared falling behind. Falling behind financially felt like danger to me. I didn't notice how often she sat alone in the evenings while I was in another room, reviewing paperwork. I thought we were both simply busy adults. Time passed steadily, not dramatically, just one ordinary day after another. When the children left home, the house felt different, quieter. She and I sat across from each other at dinner. Long pauses appeared more frequently, not uncomfortable exactly, just empty. I assumed retirement would fix it. I imagined that once work slowed, everything else would naturally improve. I was wrong about that. Retirement arrived without ceremony. One last day at the office, a small cake, handshakes, promises to stay in touch. I came home earlier than usual and sat in the living room, unsure of what to do with myself. The next morning, I woke up at the same early hour out of habit, only this time there was nowhere to rush. She was in the kitchen already. We stood there together, almost awkwardly, like two people who had to relearn each other's rhythms. I thought time would automatically bring us closer. I thought conversation would return easily. Instead, we struggled to fill the hours. I realized I did not know the details of her daily life anymore. I knew her preferences in food. I knew which relatives she spoke to regularly, but I didn't know her private thoughts, not the small worries, not the quiet disappointments. One afternoon, she said, "We lived side by side for many years, but not always together." She didn't say it harshly, just calmly. I felt something tighten inside me. I wanted to explain, to say I had done everything for the family, but even as the words formed, they felt incomplete. Over the years, I had built financial security carefully, but I had not built emotional closeness with the same effort. We tried small changes, evening walks, tea together on the balcony. Sometimes it felt natural, other times it felt forced, like we were following instructions from a book rather than instinct. Habits are strong. Even without work, I found myself retreating into silence when conversations became personal. She would begin to talk about feeling lonely during those busy years. I would listen, then respond with practical reasoning. I didn't know how to simply sit with her feelings. I think she grew tired of trying to explain. When she became ill, it was gradual. Doctor visits increased. Medication schedules were written down carefully. I accompanied her more often. In waiting rooms, we sat quietly side by side. I wanted to speak more honestly, but the words felt late. as if the window for certain conversations had slowly closed years ago. In the hospital, our talks remained ordinary. We discussed test results, the taste of hospital food. Which nurse seemed kind. Once she looked at me and said, "We did what we knew." I nodded. I'm still not sure if that was comfort or resignation. There were no dramatic final speeches, no perfect confessions, just a tired goodbye and a room that felt too bright. After she passed, the house felt unfamiliar, the bed seemed larger, the kitchen quieter. For a few days, relatives filled the rooms, then they left. Silence settled properly. I found her glasses on the bedside table and couldn't move them for months. I opened her wardrobe once and closed it quickly, not out of overwhelming grief, more out of uncertainty. I didn't know how to rearrange a life that had been shared for so long, even if imperfectly. Now my days follow a simple pattern. I wake early, make tea, read slowly. Sometimes I walk to the nearby shop just to exchange a few words with someone. Even small conversations feel important now. My children call regularly. They are respectful, caring in their own way, but I hear the distance I once created. Not intentional, just learned. Sometimes after a phone call ends, I sit quietly and think about how many evenings I traded for future security. How many small invitations to connect I postponed because I was tired or distracted. I don't live in constant regret. It is not dramatic like that. It's more like a steady understanding that I misunderstood something important. I believed love would remain stable as long as there was no conflict. I believed silence meant agreement. I believed presence could wait. I still think providing for your family matters. I don't dismiss that part of my life. We never struggled financially. Our children were educated. The house was comfortable. Those things are real, but I see now that emotional presence is also work. It requires attention, repetition, small, daily effort. It cannot be postponed for years and then restarted easily. In the evenings, I sometimes sit at the dining table and imagine one more ordinary meal with her. Nothing dramatic, just dinner. I imagine looking up when she speaks, asking her about her day without checking a clock, listening without preparing a solution. These thoughts are not cinematic. They don't lead to big realizations. They simply pass through my mind and settle quietly. At 78, I am still working on myself. I try to call my children not just to ask about their plans, but to ask how they are feeling. Sometimes the conversations are awkward. I pause too long. They pause too. But I stay in the silence instead of escaping it. Old habits remain. I still withdraw when emotions feel uncomfortable. I still prefer structure over vulnerability. But I notice it now. That is something. The house is calm tonight. Not tragic, not heavy, just still. I will wash my cup and turn off the lights. I will walk slowly to the bedroom and pause for a moment before lying down. I once believed money would protect me from the instability I feared as a young man. In many ways, it did, but it also became a wall I hid behind. Silence is my companion now, not as punishment, not as drama, just as consequence. I am still here, still thinking, still adjusting, and even now, in small, imperfect ways, I am trying to be less distant than I used to be.